All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, I'm Alana Davis, your host and Meetup organizer. I work with e-commerce shops to remove friction from the buying process. My focus is on rescuing Shopify websites, making them more effective in attracting more visitors, providing better SEO, and increasing conversion rates, all at a fraction of the cost of a full redesign. A quick look at our agenda for today. This session is being recorded, so assuming everything works, I will be sharing the video in the next day or so. Coming up on March 21st, our speaker is going to share his favorite tips for finding keyword optimization opportunities using your Google Search Console data. This is going to be so exciting. He gave me a demo of it, and it was pretty darn cool, like how he goes through his keyword optimization strategy. So I thought it was really fascinating. But expect to see an invite for this event probably in the next week. And then on April 25th, we'll do another live site review where you'll have the opportunity to submit your website for actionable insights and feedback on your Shopify store. Now, if you have any topics that you'd like to see or areas you'd like me to explore, please let me know in the feedback requests that you're going to receive along with this video recording. So that it helps me to better understand and see what's working well and or not, so that we can continue to provide a more valuable resource for you going forward. A quick shout out to our sponsor. Jason LD for SEO transforms your SEO with rich results, a program that allows you to show search enhancements such as review stars, price, and availability in Google Search, Bing, Pinterest, and other search engines. The app also provides all the structured data you need for Merchant Center. Install JSON LD for SEO today to instantly add advanced SEO features to your store. And then without further ado, I would like to introduce Mark. I'm super excited for this chat today. He's going to talk to us today about the power of pricing. So welcome, Mark.
Let me make sure the screen comes up and you guys can see it. Are we all good?
Yes, you're good.
All right, excellent. So I'm hoping to share with you a little bit about pricing today. I think it's often an underutilized tool to drive profits, acquire new customers. And excuse me, I've been a little under the weather, so hopefully I can get through this and minimize the coughing. Hopefully today I can give you some different lenses to think about your pricing strategy. It's an area that we've given a lot of focus to. And so let me just share a little bit about where we're coming from and I'm coming from. So I am co-founder of Vondra, which leverages AI to squeeze more conversions out of an e-commerce site's existing traffic. What we try to do is be a well-timed nudge for visitors who are unlikely to convert on their own. We're leveraging discounts as part of this process. So pricing is an area that we've thought a lot about. I won't leave the slide up here too long, but get into the heart of what we want to do today. As part of that, let's just start off, hopefully get some participation from you all. Imagine you're thinking about purchasing the iPhone 15. It just got released. It has an improved camera with better optical zooms, more memory, longer battery life. So go ahead if you can. I think Alana was going to share the link in the chat. Just share. How much would you pay for the new iPhone 15, assuming it came out next month? I don't actually know. I'm an Android user, I will admit, so I don't know when the iPhone 15 is coming out or if it's already come out yet. I don't think it has. Go ahead. I'll pause for a second as you guys are able to vote on that. I am trying out a new tool.
Mark, can you just confirm that you're not collecting any actual data?
I am not. Sorry, I meant to do that. I even have it bolted in my notes. I'm not collecting any data. Your responses are anonymous. So go ahead. I don't know if somebody's voting twice. It's the first time I've seen the first two prices come in at the same level. They're anonymous too, so no one's going to judge you if you put 1,500 because you really want it and be an early adopter. So one of the things I just want to highlight as these are coming in is this is the challenge that I'm sure many of you are facing as you start to think about, hey, what price should I charge for the products or services that I sell? You'll see here, I mean, we've already got a pretty wide range of prices here. So I will switch back over. If you want to keep voting, go ahead. Um, so this is the challenge, obviously, right? You've got the same product, lots of different prices that potential customers are willing to pay, right? So now you have to sort of figure out what price should I choose? This is iPhone. Maybe there's a price point of $2,000. I get fewer people, but I get to make more money. 1,200, get some more customers, or maybe say, hey, I want as many people as possible to get the iPhone. I'm going to charge in the $500 range. So go much cheaper and sell a bunch more. So what price should you choose? Well, let's put you in those shoes. So I have a fictitious, beautiful belt company. It's colorful belts, handmade by Peruvian artisans. So this is a made-up company. Those of you that have heard about the Chat GPT, Dolly sort of craze that has been going on the past few months, that picture on the right is actually created by Dolly. Just a little fun fact there. So imagine you've done some research on your customers. You're this beautiful belt company, and you've got these 4 different customer segments. So what price should they charge? So you get to be their pricing consultant on this. If you are this company, what price would you charge for your belts? Go ahead and share your votes. Whoops. There is no wrong answer for this. Just trying to grab. We've got a bunch of folks saying $60. One person is a little more aggressive, saying $80. No one saying 50. Everyone I appreciate putting a stake in the ground has voted instead of taking the none of the above or I have no idea. So it was a little bit of a trick question. Maybe there is no right answer. What I'm hoping to do today is to just hopefully help you break free from a single price mentality and ultimately unlock hidden profits and acquire more customers. So I sort of made that choice of, hey, do you charge 80? Do you charge 60? Do you charge 50? What I'm going to do for the rest of this session is really talk about different ways to think about pricing. Again, leaning into what excuse me, I would describe as a multi-price mindset. So I'm going to go through different approaches. Before I dive into them, just be aware that there are multiple approaches. I'm going to present them separately, but they often have some overlap. They are not mutually exclusive, so you can use them together. And the ultimate goal for today, again, is to really give you new vantage points to think about your pricing strategy to unlock those profits and attract new customers. So the first one, dynamic pricing. I'm not going to spend as much time on this one. It is more straightforward than some of the others. But what if you could differentiate your pricing to more closely match each customer's or each customer segment's willingness to pay? So imagine that beautiful belt company who's having to choose between 80, 60, and 50. What if there are a world where they could actually find that right price point? It sometimes feels a little different for folks to think like that. You're probably experiencing this in a lot of different places in your life. I've highlighted a few industries that it's pretty common in. So air travel, there's a good chance that you've paid a different price than the person sitting next to you on a plane. Hotels, you may have paid a different price than the person staying in the room next to you. Home buying and new and used cars. There are some conditions as you think about this that are often very favorable for dynamic pricing. So if you've got a fixed capacity, like you may be selling a product there are only so many of. Imagine you're selling like a collectible. So it's not easy to spin up production and create more supply. And if you price it too lowly, you're going to end up running out of product really quickly and not have any more product to sell. Another industry where you see this a lot, where there's perishable inventory. So if a product has a finite shelf life because it rots, or like it's, hey, if you're staying in a hotel this Friday night, when Friday comes and goes, if that hotel room isn't filled, the value of it goes to zero. Or if there's significant uncertainty around demand, that's often another space where you'll see dynamic pricing. So imagine you are a band touring and you don't know, like, when I get to Kansas City, Missouri, or I get to Portland, Oregon, I may have different levels of demand in those two cities. And again, have a fixed capacity situation. So what's the right price? There are some challenges as you think about dynamic pricing. One of the biggest is it's often not feasible or can be really expensive to continuously change and manage prices. So you often have to have lots of data and be able to analyze that data to be able to tease out that willingness to pay for individual customers or a segment. You also have to have the ability to serve up different prices. So companies like Amazon are changing their prices oftentimes a million times a day. Um, but oftentimes when we talk, for example, with small and medium-sized e-commerce brands, there is a challenge of if I'm changing my price, I often have situations where I'm getting PR. I'm on somebody's list of top 10 gifts under $100, let's say, or I have other, influencers that are promoting my product where if I have changing prices, I can create this disconnect of what they share my prices and what it is when people come to my site. The second challenge, and probably I think when we've talked with merchants, often the bigger barrier is this sense of fairness and sort of the human psychology of it that customers may perceive it as being unfair if they get a different price than somebody else. Interestingly enough, in one of those industries I shared before, there was a company that went against sort of the dynamic pricing, generally accepted way of doing business, and that was Saturn with cars. And they actually had really high repurchase rates and really high customer satisfaction. They ultimately proved not to be as profitable as hoped, and so GM shut them down, and there are lots of reasons for that. But there are benefits, even if you're in one of those industries where dynamic pricing is more common, of going against that grain a little bit. Approach number two. This is where we play at. It's an area we've given a lot of thought to, which is discounting. I would say it is a cousin of dynamic pricing. Um, it's often a situation where you have a sticker price, but the price being paid by customers may vary based on the discount that you're giving them. You typically run into less fairness concerns from a customer perspective when you're using discounting. Um, and what I'm going to go through here today, again, ultimately the same goal with dynamic pricing of capturing more of that demand that's out there. Whereas if you're picking a single price point, you're sort of limiting your ability to tap into the demand and capture the value from the customer. So there's some different flavors of this. You could actually apply some of these flavors to pricing as well. There's the segmented discount flavor. This is one that you probably see a lot in everyday life. There are two key elements of the segmented discounts to think about. One is that a segment that you are targeting has a different willingness to pay, and that segment is identifiable in some way. So you can determine if a customer is part of that segment or not, and they can sort of be aware if they're part of that segment or not. So common segments that you see are around age, like senior citizen discounts at movies, affiliation, so military discounts at amusement parks, excuse me, AAA member discounts at hotels. There's behavior, and a lot of you are probably using some of this behavior segmentation. Abandoned cart, where somebody sort of is in that segment. Clearance shoppers, you have a section where those discount shoppers can go and self-segment into that. There's some other non-obvious segments. Here are examples from that you may see out in the everyday world and different lenses to think about for your own business, which is location. In the skiing industry, there's often a price for like skiing passes if you live in a given state and if you don't, right? Locals may be looking to ski from 4 to 7 p.m. and they're going to ski 1 to 2 times a week all winter long. And then you've got another group that's the vacationers, the out-of-state vacationers who are coming 8 hours, 5 straight days. And so because of that segmentation, you're able to target them a little more effectively. Happy hour is another great one. A lot of times when you're going for happy hour, it's less about the food. It's more about the social experience. You're grabbing a drink with coworkers. The way the restaurant's able to limit that is saying, hey, anyone that's willing to come before 5 o'clock can get it, tap into that discount. Another common brand of discount that you see, another one for you all to think about, is that friction-based discount. This is where you're basically saying to your customers, hey, we're going to put up a little bit of a hurdle for you to get that discount. So if you're price sensitive and you have a lower willingness to pay, you'll go through that hurdle. If you're not as price sensitive, you may not want to forego that time, that effort, and just go straight through the checkout process. So again, that underlying assumption for this is that those price sensitive customers will withstand a little bit of friction. A lot of you probably have a version of this on your site, which is that 10% off for a newsletter sign up. So, hey, you give us your email address, you go check your email, you'll get the discount there. So again, that price sensitive customer willing to go through that little bit of friction in order to get that discount. Someone who doesn't care, your price point works for them, they may not be willing to go through that friction and they'll just check out. You often see this as well as sort of off-site searching or memberships. Honey, I would say, is almost like a version of the old coupon clipping that folks may have done with newspapers where, hey, you've got to install this thing. put it on your computer, use it when you're browsing around, and you get access to this discount. You had to go through that friction in order to get that discount. Other flavors to think about, you have quantity based discounts, pretty straightforward. The more you buy, the more you save. One that may not be thought of as much, depending on if you're a multi channel business, is distribution channel discounts. So, oftentimes, where customers shop can strongly correlate to what their willingness to pay. So, if you're a clothing brand and you're in a brand like Brooks Brothers, where you know that already is sort of a high end shopping experience, you might be able to have a different price point or different discounting strategy depending on those different channels. Time-based discounts, people who are willing to buy up front versus people who are willing to wait. The one that I do want to highlight on this page, which is sort of interesting, is that mixed bundle discount. So what this is about is putting two products that are different together. So let's imagine there's a company that sells shoes and sells socks. They may have a price point of $100 for their shoes, and they've got high-end socks that they sell for $40. So what they do is they put those two products together and they say, if you buy them both, we'll charge $120. What that does is it actually allows you to tap into multiple different levels of willingness to pay. So you may have a customer that was willing to pay 100 for the shoes and only 20 for the socks, who now, because you bundled them together, can buy both of them. So they would have just bought the shoes separately. You may have customers that were willing to pay 40 for the socks and only 80 for the shoes, who would have only bought the socks if you kept them separate, that now will pay 120 for them together. Or you may have a customer that's only willing to pay 90 for the shoes and 30 for the socks, but now because you bundled them together, they'll pay that 120. So again, that mixed bundle is sort of an interesting way to maybe tap into different willingness to pays across your different products if you sell more than one product. But again, lots of different flavors to tap into discounting to unlock. Again, the goal is to how do you better tap into the varying willingness to pay, which we already saw with that iPhone example early on. Approach number three, and where I'm probably going to spend more time than in the other ones, is versioning. And I think versioning in a lot of ways is sort of a pricing plus approach. So it's thinking about that intersection of what users value about your product and their willingness to pay. And it's typically going to require a deeper understanding of your customers because it's not just, hey, they have different willingness to pay, but as I start to understand those groups, what drives the value for those groups that have different willingness to pay. So you really do with this approach have a chance to increase the value you capture from those existing customers and find interesting and different new ways to attract new customers. So I think this one is probably most easily explained through some examples. So flights is a really great example of this. At its most basic level, flights get you from point A to point B quickly, right? Like you could take a train, you could drive, but flights are a really fast way to cover long distances. The way I think about versioning is you're often adding an adjective that applies to that basic need. So again, the basic need is getting you from point A to point B quickly. But if I do it, get you from point A to point B in luxury, that's one way I can do it. Get you from point A to point B cost effectively or on a budget. And you can see by just sort of creating that extra adjective, now I've created two different versions of my product. So that luxury product, that luxury first class version may say, hey, I'm appealing to business travelers who oftentimes are not paying for the ticket out of their own pocket, or I may be tailoring this more towards high income travelers. They may be more likely to travel a lot. So they want to be the ones who get on the plane first. They want to enjoy the travel experience more because it's happening more frequently. And so those folks may have a higher willingness to pay, but I've got to better meet their needs in order to attain that higher willingness to pay and get them to pay that extra money. Um, Obviously, I get to capture more revenue per customer than was possible if I had a single price point mentality. The thing is, I'm probably unlikely to be able to fill up an entire plane with all luxury passengers. So I create a second product, which is more budget friendly version of flight, the economy class. Right, this is the leisure traveler who's probably paying out of their own pocket. They're probably not traveling as frequently. So whereas that first class customer, I had to give them some additional amenities like priority boarding, more space, free drinks, and other perks. This economy traveler who's more price sensitive, I say, hey, maybe I take away some of those perks and strip down the travel experience, cut out some of those costs. So I might have smaller seats, a little bit less foot room. Um, and so I can get that customer who maybe is more price sensitive to buy a ticket with my airline. And so you see how by creating these two different versions, they're able to tap into multiple points along that demand curve and really fill up that flight and fill it up as profitably as possible. So again, probably if I had a first class only flight, I would it'd be harder to sell out. So having that balance of luxury and budget version allows me to increase the demand, and for those first class customers, actually tap into their greater willingness to pay. Another great example is amusement parks. If any of you have been to an amusement park in the last 10 years, you've probably seen a version of this. So at its most basic level, right? An amusement park is a place to have fun and ride some rides. And so here's, I think about sort of that adjective that I could apply to the different price points. I've got the weight free version, which is you often hear it as the fast pass. So this is often targeted towards customers that are single day visitors or high income visitors who want to pack in as much fun as they can because they're only there for a day. They may want to hit all the rides, but hit them all in a day. It's an upsell opportunity. I increase the amount of value I can extract out of the customer from that fast pass. So they're usually buying it as an add-on. They get to skip the line and pack in more rides. So it better meets their needs. Then I've got my standard no rush amusement park pass, right? This might be for your week-long visitors or lower income visitors or even locals, right? This is a group that I can offer a lower price to. They may feel less need to try to hit every big ride because they're there for a week, or if they're local, they can come back again and again. So they may be a little bit more price sensitive, lower willingness to pay. So again, if I had a single price mentality here, I would have had to pick some single price point in between and hope that I could appeal to both audiences. I'd probably be doing so in a way that was a little bit suboptimal for both of them. But as I start to think about different ways you can version your products and experiences, it opens up new ways to tap into customer needs, extract more value out of the customer by better serving their needs, and also attract new customers here, right? I might be able to lower my price point for standard tickets. So let's go back now. We've sort of educated ourselves on versioning a little bit and think about, hey, I've got those 4 customer segments. How might I version my product in order to better meet their needs and better match their willingness to pay? I'm definitely going to pause for a bit here to give you a chance to share your ideas. I'll let it fill in some dead time if I need to get some more responses in here. Nice. Fabrics on the belt packaging. I'd love as you put ideas in there if there's a specific segment you think you might be targeting with some of these. So I'll go back here to the segments. This is a good lesson for next time. I should paste in the different segments into the chat so you can see it while you're typing too. And I can see the answers. Different metals. Great ideas. I see a couple people still typing. Pick the country source. Different class for the belts. So I think I hear some of these ideas of, hey, I create a slightly nicer version with different metals or different class. Maybe there's some premium packaging I can do to sort of set my brand apart, different fabrics on the belt. So I'm going to sort of talk through some ideas we came up with as a team here. I could do a limited edition. I think some of you were tapping into some of these ideas too. So maybe this will build on some of what you shared. So a limited edition where maybe there's exclusivity. Segment A cares about style and trendiness. So I say, hey, we're only going to make 200 of these belts. We're going to charge 80 for them. So if you're someone who cares about trendiness, you may be willing to pay a little bit extra in order to get access to one of those exclusive ones. Maybe for segment C that cares about sustainability, I do an environmental friendly version that's organic materials only. So again, targeted appeal, it can sit alongside that base product. Maybe for people, I think someone tapped into this sort of pick the country. If I want to tap into that brand story, maybe I support, we call it Project Peru. I think many of you may be familiar with Project Red that Gap and Bono put together. So maybe I tap into that social cause that people maybe appeal to some subsegment of my customers, that segment B. And so I lean into the work we're doing with Peruvian artisans here at the Beautiful Belt Company to serve that emotional value driver. Again, thinking about the flip side here, maybe there's an essential no frills version where I say, hey, I'm only going to let you pick one or two colors for the essential editions. It's really going to focus on that function for the person that cares primarily about fit. Sorry, we're going to get kids pumping. And I charge a lower price point, but it's less appealing and less attractive for some of those other segments. So again, sometimes it's adding different features, sometimes it's taking away features as you think about versioning. So different different ideas to consider as you think about versioning, especially in the context of e-commerce. So delivery speed can often be one that people version on, right? That person that has a higher willingness to pay may be willing to pay a little bit extra to get your product in 2 days instead of 5 or 7 days. Payment options is another one. This oftentimes can bump up someone's willingness to pay by actually spreading out the payments over a more manageable timeline. One of the things I want to call it as we're doing this is it doesn't just have to be your product. Someone hit packaging, which is a really great one. It doesn't always just be about your core product when you're thinking about versioning. It can often be about the experience that surrounds your product. Exclusivity, access. We saw an example in the versioning a second ago, but another one that we see really commonly in e-commerce is drops. We see some brands tap into that. It often fosters a sense of community. So the people that are part of that community who may view having access to or having bought a certain product as a sort of a badge of how strong their ties to the community are. Those drops can be an effective way to do that. Customizations and upsells can often be another thing to think about, where you offer add-ons that allow those customers with greater willingness to pay to upgrade or tweak the product to better meet their needs or tastes. So that's probably where the fast pass falls in, right? I've got my base amusement park price, and I've got a version that those who are more time sensitive can opt into. So again, just sort of highlighting some of the ones that we talked about today. Vondra plays in the discounting space, but really as we sort of go through the things to think about as you're looking to utilize these. So dynamic pricing and discounting are often saying, hey, don't change your product offering, but look for ways to capture more of that demand curve because you're able to tailor the pricing in some way that unlocks, and the discounting in a way that unlocks more ways for more customers to get access to your product. The challenges obviously with dynamic pricing are it may not be feasible to change and maintain different price points. It can often run into fairness considerations. When we talk with brands around discounting, there's sort of that risk of devaluing your brand or having the feeling of like, my customers are dependent on discounts. Versioning, while I think it can do a really great job of better aligning price and value, and you can sort of tap into those side segments, it oftentimes will require some product experiential operational tweaks to make it come to fruition. All of these probably require some level of customer understanding and segmentation. So how do you really get that understanding of who's buying your product? Why are they buying it? How do those differences and why they buy the product map to their willingness to pay? So a key part of all of these strategies is really going to be about uncovering those features, those benefits that drive attractiveness to your customers. And with versioning, what you're really trying to do is tweak some of those features about the experience in the product to better match those user needs. I probably went through that a little faster than expected, but I want to make sure there's time for questions here at the end, either about your particular situation or as you look to apply this to your business.
If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I did make some notes myself, but I wanted to touch on something that you just said about tapping into kind of what your customers are looking for and better understanding, how to know what they're willing to pay. Do you have any guidance on helping folks understand? Is it like a questionnaire that they should be sending out,
Yeah.
or is it just testing here and there?
I have heard lots of different ways that folks create that sort of closeness with their customers. One way, a common way, is post-purchase surveys, right? These people have bought your products. Why'd you buy it? We had a brand we talked to the other day And this woman was selling, it's a little bit of inspiration for the example here. She was selling Indian embroidered dresses. So they were in the style of sort of traditional Indian fashion. She was having them made by Indian artisans. And she realized as she started to survey her customers, some people were buying it because they loved the designs. Some people connected with that story of like these were made in India. Some people were actually buying them because they were beautiful embroidered dresses for quinceanera celebrations. And she realized like that was a big part of her customer segment, that they didn't care about necessarily that story behind it. They just love the designs. And so post-purchase survey is a great one. We've talked with a merchant who is doing close to $10 million in revenue. And he, for the first 2 years of his business, sent a reply to everybody that bought a product that he tried to tailor about where they were from or something. So open the door for feedback about the experience, about why they bought the product. Those are two examples. Popping up a poll. I know a lot of people use surveys to sort of slot you into what products they can recommend. Those are all great ways to really start understanding like what is it that appeals to people about your product, because they're usually buying it to serve a need, and how do you find what those needs are?
I love that. Kirby just asked, how does this work for subscription products? I get the immediate discount for subscribing, but long term, people may say unfair if the monthly charge is different.
So what we've often heard for subscription businesses is lowering the barrier to entry is oftentimes where you see the discounting or the pricing take effect, where it's like, hey, we'll give you a discount to get you in the door so you can experience this. That's often how we see the discounts. That is a fair point, as you sort of pricing the same thing, right? Like as you start to do it in a, this price is just fundamentally different. Part of this also comes down to transparency too. How easy is it for someone to see the differential pricing or differential discounts? What we have found is pricing tends to be more transparent than discounting. And that's actually the reason we've gone into discounting as a business. But how much do you know about what other people are paying? I mean, you know, intellectually, you're probably paying a different price than other people on the plane, but you may not know how much of a difference there is. So that fairness can often come with what's the level of transparency to the pricing that you're offering? Are you doing it in email versus on your site where it's happening as well? I don't know if that answers your question or not.
So if I can sort of rephrase in a way that works for me so I can understand it. Um, is it a matter of the or do you recommend that people put their pricing publicly on their website so that that's a way to be transparent about it? Or are you saying, hey, we're sort of feeling this out. We're going to start at $10 a month for this. And then someone else might subscribe again in a month from now, and theirs is $11. It's not a huge price difference. And so you don't have that feeling of unfairness necessarily because it's so close. Or would you say it's okay to be more of a range?
I think this is one of those things you may have to figure out what in like your
Mhm.
industry and your segment, there may be varying receptiveness to differential pricing. Obviously, as you see, like people have become this, the concept of fairness is a human psychology one. So there's a little bit about expectations. And for whatever reason, historically, we've become to expect that airplane and ticket prices often vary. And there's obviously some reasons behind that. So it may depend on what industry you're in. I do think some of it depends on how easy it is for someone to know what price someone else is paying. So discounts often combat that, where everyone can see the same price, but you won't know what discount someone else got. So it plays into the human psychology of fairness that may vary a little bit from industry to industry.
And how would you handle that if someone did say, like, hey, my friend is also subscribing or they bought this and they bought it at a different price? Do you have a recommendation on how folks can handle that situation?
That is a tough one.
Or
I
is
mean,
that outside of your realm? Maybe I'm
yeah,
asking the wrong question.
I don't, I mean, I think it's understanding your customers a little better. Do you have a story or reason to sort of help justify that? Is that just, hey, we had a different price going at that point? Is that something where we've heard brands where they say, hey, what we do in situations like that is less about giving a price discount, where we might say, hey, as someone who's been a long time customer, there's a product bonus, like you could use it to introduce a new product. So there are different ways to spin that. It may depend on what's the variety of products you have, what's the ability to continue to grow that relationship versus, if you are selling one thing and that's all you sell. And so if you start giving out anybody that sort of notices those discounts, you're really starting to erode your profitability. And your customers want you to stay in business, right? Like ultimately, they want you to stay in business if they value your product.
Definitely, yeah. Um, how long do you recommend testing different pricing strategies? Or is it not a length of time? There should be something else that people should be measuring that off of before they settle on something.
I mean, there's probably a statistical um, validity piece to it that you could think about. Some of this may be a little bit of a gut piece of it, depending on the volume that you're doing. It can take a while to get statistically significant results. I think this is where just if you're a smaller business too, we're talking to your customers, right? Like if you're in an ideal scenario, you probably want some customers to say no to your product because of price, because then you know you're at the point where like you're giving them the value. I think if everybody's saying yes and they're saying yes and they're like, this is great, I don't even balk at the price, that may be a signal for you that your price is a little bit too low, as uncomfortable as it may be. I think there's a lot of research about around businesses early on underpricing, to be honest, rather than overpricing, because you want people to adopt your product, to try your product. You sort of have that inclination when you're getting going to do that. That you do probably want to be at a point where someone's making a decision. And if nobody's making a decision, it probably means your price too low.
Yeah, and Elisa, hopefully I said your name right. Elisa just mentioned that too, where she sends personalized emails and messages to their customers to kind of get to know them a little better. And I actually saw this happened last week. There's a friend of mine who was trying to sell something and set a price that I was like, to me, that felt really high. And so I was like, you might want to feel that one out. And they reached out and sent an email that was like, what feels fair to you? And it was like half of what they had quoted because they were trying to see what that right price range was. And it wasn't until they blatantly asked the question, what feels good for you, that helped them to get that research that they needed. So definitely talking with your customers is really important in this.
And it's easier to peg your price if you feel like you're in a space where there are lots of competitors that feel very similar. As you get to more unique products, that price becomes a lot more subjective. So if you provide one of a kind products or handmade products or whatever it may be, where it's not as easy to find comparisons, it often can be a much wider range of potential prices and potential discounts. But even when you are in a competitive situation, right? Like, yes, the iPhone is sort of a unique product, but there are lots of phones that people could buy. And you saw the variation of what people were willing to pay. And so I don't, again, I think part of what we're hoping to do today is saying, hey, there probably isn't a single optimal price. Like, if that's what you're looking for, it's going to be hard to find it. But how do you find different ways to capture value? Again, it might be through dynamic pricing. It might be through discounting, where you say, hey, I'm going to set a bit of a higher price, but I know I'm going to be able to capture some demand by offering discounts later on. Or, hey, I've got versions of my product that allow people who have a higher willingness to pay to opt into those more premium products.
Yeah, and I want to get to this question from Kirby too, but it sort of reminded me of Apple's take on their pricing. You rarely ever see discounts on it because they are a premium brand and they list their prices at a premium price. And so I think a lot of it has to do also with the brand and the way that you want to present yourself, making sure that your pricing aligns with how you're putting yourself out there as a
I will
business.
say this: Apple is a great example. Early on, they do it less now. I think you used to only be able to get Apple on certain carriers and through a sort of monthly fee. So they use that payment structure. They said, hey, instead of forking over $800 up front, you're going to fork over $20 a month for 40 months, and you're committing to certain years, or $30 a month for 2 years, type of thing.
Yeah,
So there are different ways to even think about it. Even those brands sometimes you think is premium, they have different ways to help people with different willingness to pay get into their product.
you're absolutely right. Okay, so Kirby asks, does discounting make my brand seem cheaper? Let's use less expensive instead of cheaper, just because I like that word better. Does discounting make my brand seem less expensive? Kind of like the old spin on the wheel for your discount. We want to be seen as more premium since we use better quality materials than our competition.
So there's lots of human psychology. We are actually trying to play in this space and find that right spot. There is lots of research around expectations. Do I think this discount is always going to be around or not, or do I think a discount is coming? So there's it whether it starts to feel like, oh, this isn't really the price, it's a lower price. There's expectations. So some of the research that I know about is if you get over a certain percentage, oftentimes if you're up in the neighborhood of 50%, right? Then there starts to be like, hold on, I start to question what the true value of this thing is if you get too high. There is the expectation. I mean, there are some studies around like non-round numbers. If you don't give someone 20 and you give them 17, 17 feels so different than what they normally expect that they're like, there must be something about me that is happening here, and that not everybody's getting a 17% discount. So we are playing in the realm largely of human psychology of what's the anchor price for the customer and how are you changing that anchor price with your discount, to the point of if you always have a banner that sits at the top of your page that says 20% off, at some point people are just going to be like, the product is worth 20% less. And that's actually, again, not to get too far into our product where it's around like just in time discounting. So it is not the first thing that they see on the site. It is something that's popping up later in the experience that feels more tailored and time sensitive. But this is human psychology and how it plays out. It's actually some of the psychology behind those spinners. If you believe there's some randomness in the spinner, then you sort of believe like I could get lucky today, even though I know most of those are sort of weighted accordingly, or programmed to be like 10% is going to be 90% of the time what you're going to get. So there is that piece of it. I will say this: almost every brand that is concerned around this sort of brand degradation that I know of has like a 10% off for signing up for their newsletter. A good percentage of them have an abandoned cart discount. So even those brands that are sort of consider themselves pretty premium are probably doing some of that. They're usually doing it in a place where there's an exchange of value happening. And so that can also be a way to mitigate it where, hey, this isn't just a discount. You're giving us your email address, or you're giving us some piece of information that we can derive value from.
It's funny because Kirby used the word cheaper, and then I said, let's use less expensive. And then you use the words value, and you've used that throughout your presentation. And I really wanted to call that out because I struggle with that too as a business owner, of reminding myself that it's about value and what the value that you're giving to your customers, not what you think the value is, because I might value things differently. So I just wanted to really hone in on that, because I always think about it as like, what is the right pricing? Well, it's not about the pricing, it's what's the value that they're going to get out of it. That's what they want to focus on.
Yeah. And again, a lot of the stuff is specific to your brand and where you want to be positioned too. And there are ways, if discounting isn't what you want to do, there obviously the versioning can tap into that. Maybe we've got limited edition products that say, hey, if you have a higher willingness to pay, it allows us to offer that lower price entry option if you have a premium product, right? Like people who are into some of the top brands oftentimes will get like the small purse instead of the higher price, full size purse. Like there are usually entry points to get
Yeah.
people associated with your brand. That's where versioning can be a really powerful tool. So today, hopefully the lesson is not apply discounting everywhere. That was not the goal today. The goal is to give you different levers to think about for your business. And again, even as you guys have shared some examples, you're noticing that this is not sort of it's one or the other. Oftentimes can be multiple together.
Yeah, and you said it earlier too, right? Is like, or alluded to it. You have to test it. You have to see what works, and you have to try different things and see how your customers respond to them, and interact with them and talk with them to see how they respond to the way that you've decided to try out your different pricing strategies.
I mean, let me ask this question. For those of you who send out emails, there's a good chance that someone else does not see that. Like, you're probably experimenting in your emails with lots of things. And so those can be great places to experiment with pricing. You might have sort of an exclusive product. You say, I'm going to try an email and see if people have a higher willingness to pay than I thought. Or that may be a place where you experiment a little bit with discounting. I'm sure there are businesses out there A/B testing, like what happens if I do discounting in my abandoned cart? What happens if I don't? What's the difference in the conversion rates versus the basket values versus those things? So those are some things. Obviously, the e-commerce space has some attributes that make the costs in the experimentation go way down. So imagine you were a restaurant. Changing your menu every day and playing with pricing is probably pretty cost prohibitive. But in e-commerce, you have that sort of digital experience that you can play with some of this stuff, whether it's in small pieces, whether it's through email, whether it's through text message to do that.
Yeah, and I was just trying to check in with Elisa because she had asked a question about Google Analytics tracking. So she was saying that for those of us who don't believe in Google Analytics tracking of our customers, is there a viable strategy? I think she was in referencing to like better understanding your customers beyond communicating with email. So is there a strategy through analytics that they can look at either through Shopify or another tool that's not like an invasion of privacy?
I mean, Shopify gives you a good amount. This is also where if you are doing testing with your emails, just adding some UTM parameters, things that you don't have to track across sessions, but you can at least understand when this person came back. And so if you're looking at some specific sessions, those could be helpful, and those don't have to be cookie based, right? Like you can just say, hey, I'm trying to sense clicks. What's happening with those clicks? Discount codes allow, it's actually one of the reasons we went into that as a company, allow that attribution more easily too, where you can literally see who came through with what discount codes. We know people use that a lot in advertising, especially in advertising that may be non-digital. So if you do things where you're not sure how many people are going to see this, I haven't done it, but on the Bitly link would have been a good example where I could have been like, hey, how many people went to my Vondra schedule with certain links versus other links, and just sort of see where that traffic's coming from. And it doesn't, to the point of the Google Analytics, it doesn't have to be something you're carrying across sessions and is following them around. It's just more some raw numbers that give you a sense of appeal. Did this change the appeal significantly when I offered a 10% versus 15% discount, or I had product A versus product B?
Definitely. You had also talked earlier about products bundling. Do you have any recommendations on how to decide which products to bundle? Because sometimes it's obvious, if you have a phone and you want to bundle a charger and a case together, like those are obvious things. But is there other ways for you to kind of gauge which products might be a good fit together?
I think if you want to tap into the mixed product bundle to really sort of say, hey, there are different willingness to pay for my products, you usually want to pick two different products, right? It's not the same product twice, like buy one, get one type thing.
Yeah.
It is these two products where I can start to see, is there this pent up demand? Because I'm seeing people buy this bundle together more than I'm seeing them buy the individual products. Again, because it allows you to sort of tap into the two different willingness to pay across the product, it can often be illuminating. So you want things that are different. Related probably helps in the sense of like socks and shoes, they go together. So they naturally fit together. But I think you want them to be different so that it doesn't start to just feel like a bulk discount. If you want to sort of experiment with that, hey, I've got a razor and shaving cream. They're both premium products. Maybe if I put them together with a little discount, I can get people to buy both instead of just buying one. And I now start to have a better understanding. Maybe they're both, gives them entry points into buying each one individually versus buying each one individually.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. Well, I think that that's all the questions that we have. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to put it into the chat. You can also reach out to Mark. I'm going to put his link in there into the chat for you as well. So feel free to reach out to him, and you can always ask direct questions that way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This was fantastic. I learned so much from it, and I hope everyone else was able to gather some knowledge as well. But I really wanted to say thank you to Mark because this was so enlightening. And we were chatting earlier before we joined the call about different pricing strategies. And it's so funny. There's so many different ways that you can do it, so many different levers that you can pull. So it was very fascinating to hear about this. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks everyone for joining. I will get the recording out to y'all hopefully later this week. So we should be good to go. So thank you all so much and have a lovely day.